So let's take a look at a couple of flat earthers who are confused by Polaris and perspective. Last month, Multi-Tom released this video called Angles to Polaris Prove a Flat Earth. And pay attention to what he says right here. So let's have a listen.
The ball earth Decepticons will use a diagram similar to this to deceive you, because they will use the red lines and present it as angles to Polaris, but of course that is wrong, because as you move further away, the star should lower towards the horizon, as shown by the green line. So this can only happen on a flat Earth.
Well, that's certainly a fine example of well thought out flat earth logic. So the title of this video is Angles to Polaris Prove a Flat Earth, and then he shows us a diagram with two red lines from the observer to Polaris. But then he immediately contradicts himself and says, as you move farther away, the star should lower towards the horizon as shown by the green line. And of course, the green line is an angle to a location that is well below Polaris. So the funny thing is that Multi-Tom actually deceived himself. And if there was truth in advertising, the title to his video should have been Angles Not to Polaris Are Required to Prove a Flat Earth. Because this is actually a green line of perspective. Now, if Multi-Tom actually understood how perspective worked, what he would have said is, as you move farther away, the star would appear to lower towards the horizon. And funny enough, his diagram actually shows this. So all we need to do is just fill in this triangle formed by the line of sight from 5,000 miles. Then move it over so the observer location is at the same place as the 1,000-mile observer. And look at that. The green line of sight here is lower than the red line of sight here, which clearly shows that, yes, Polaris does appear closer to the horizon when it is 5,000 miles away as opposed to when it is 1,000 miles away. And you have to wonder, why are these simple concepts so confusing to flat earthers? Of course, we know why they do this. So here I've drawn a flat earth scale drawing. I put Polaris at 3,000 miles in altitude, North Pole at 0, flat earth equator 6,225 miles, and over here we would have the flat earth ice wall at about 12,000 miles. And of course, when we add lines of sight to Polaris, we quickly understand that Polaris would be visible everywhere on a flat Earth. Of course, the title of the Multi-Tom's video would have to be changed to Angles to Polaris Destroy a Flat Earth. But Multi-Tom would rather deceive himself and pretend that green lines of perspective prove a flat Earth. Of course, then you have to wonder, does Multi-Tom think that Polaris is physically lower in altitude as you get farther away? Well, last year, Gleem actually made that claim on Randy Flat Earth's Roundtable. Now, I did have a comment on my channel that said that Gleem actually is not a Flat Earth believer. He is a Flat Earth sympathizer. But you have to wonder, why would you sympathize with the flat Earth? And why would you go on Ranty's show and make a claim that is just absolute blatant nonsense? So I did make a video that was called Gleem Invents Perspective Math. So these are all of Gleem's calculations for the altitude of Polaris in the northern hemisphere. So up here in the upper left, we start at 90 degrees north, or the North Pole, and what he calls the apparent altitude is 3,958 miles. Not really certain where he got that figure from, but you can see as you move away from the North Pole towards the equator, the apparent altitude decreases. until we go down here to the lower right at the equator, and the altitude is now 0 miles. So Polaris is literally sitting on the surface of the Earth. Now I will give Gleem an A+ for the math because every one of these calculations is correct. There's just one little problem. The apparent altitude is measured in degrees, not actual miles. So I'm taking that A+ away and marking your paper F for failure. Of course, flat earthers have other ways of solving this problem, and here we have p-brane with his perspective matrix. Now this actually has to do with the setting sun, but it is literally the same thing. So let's have a listen.
Okay, here's a little illustrator or a little cartoon from a website called timeanddate.com. It's really funny that they would have a perfect illustration of a sun rising and setting on a flat earth due to perspective.
Now I think what is funny is that you actually think the sun does this at noon.
That it rises from below the horizon and sets below the horizon. Now you might be saying, well, how's that possible? I can see now you're saying that it rises and lowers due to perspective, but how does it disappear below the horizon? Well, I got a theory about that. Because of the fact that all parallel lines and planes converge at your eye level horizon, this is according to the perspective, I'm not making this up. If in fact, and they do, they converge at your eye level horizon visually, then it makes sense that after that point, they diverge, meaning they then separate. So the sun would continue on a downward track.
So on the bullshit meter, I'm going to give Multi-Tom, Tom, and Gleem a pack of lies. Because p-brane certainly deserves the title of total bullshit. Of course, if you think these guys are the fountain of knowledge, then maybe it's time to buy a t-shirt and come out of the flat earth closet.